Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the Meze Audio Alba. So this one, and I was kind of like other people, this one was sent to reviewers a while back, probably a few months ago, and then they went through production issues of trying to get the finish right and the price right and get all the sets produced. So it took a little bit longer than they anticipated, but so finally was actually released this week. So if you see a ton of reviews in a short period of time, that is why. It's because people have had this set for quite a while, but weren't allowed to post any reviews or really talk about it. But this is what it looks like up close. And I think the first thing that I noticed when I received it was the pictures all show it as a flat white, or maybe not flat, but a shiny white. But it definitely has more of a pearlescent sheen to it. So it will pick up colors and lighting, and you can kind of see mine is a little bit more yellowish than white. And that's just kind of picking up the light in the room. I think the finish is really nice, and I sort of understand that they wanted it just the way they wanted it, and I think they got it just the way they wanted it. So, yes, it took a little bit longer, but I think they got it to the point where they were happy with it, and everything all turned out great in the end. It also does come with a nice white case. It does come with a cable, nice SPC cable. It's a little bit thin. If you are not a fan of tangly cables, this one will tangle on you if you look at it sideways. The dongle is kind of your USB-C dongle. It's kind of nice. Got their logo on it. I didn't use it too much. The tuning actually sounds pretty fine, just using your normal desktop amp or dongle, whatever you got. If you need a dongle, they give you a dongle, which is actually a great idea. So that is what's kind of in the box and all of that. So let's kind of start right at the top. And I think when people first saw this set, the first grasp here, they said, oh, it looks like just another Harman set. And then you see a bunch of first impressions come out, and it's like, well, whoa, everyone's saying it's the most amazing set, it's the perfect set, most beautiful tuning ever kind of thing. And then you're kind of thinking, well, it's just a Harman set, right? How could it be so good, yet the tuning looks very much like a Harman set? So I think the real question is it the best Harman set? That's not really the right question. The question is it actually a Harman set, period? And I will make the case that it is actually not a Harman set. And it actually addresses a lot of what annoys people about Harman sets. And we'll start with the sub-bass. So the sub-bass looks exactly like the Harman level. It looks like this is a sub-bass focused Harman style 10 dB set, but in your ear it is not. It's definitely more rolled off than it appears on the graph. I have no idea what they did on the sub bass to make a graph like that but sound differently in your ear. It's vented in some way. There is some magic to the sub bass that it is definitely a lot lower. It's probably a good 3 dB at least lower than what it looks like on a graph. So right away it doesn't sound like a Harman sub bass focused set just because of that one change. And yeah, I know it graphs that way, but there's just no way. In your ear, it's a much different set. Second, they actually added some mid-bass. If you are used to strict Harman, you know that they drop the mid-bass down to the floor, and it's a very lean sound. It kind of annoys people who like male vocals. So second thing that they modified, they added some mid-bass, and sounds much better that way, sounds more natural that way. And all of these things are additive, right? So clean sub-bass, a little bit of mid-bass, or clean sub-bass, a little bit of mid-bass to address the male vocals. And then right here, this is going to be really hard to see on camera, but they actually dropped the ear gain just below the Harman line. And for those of you who watch my after shows a lot, you recognize that move. That is the ultimate move to do. If you are not a Harman fan, Harman has a very lean, because there's no mid-bass, and bright for female vocals, right at that spot, because they tend to be 10 dB or 11 dB. They tend to ride the Harman line or go right above the Harman line. So almost all of my EQs will bring it right below the Harman line, exactly where Alba did it. A brilliant move, mostly because that's the one that I do too, but very, very noticeable. And that's sort of these three things all combine into why people are saying the tuning sounds so great. It sounds a little different. No one's calling it a Harman style set, or sounds like a Harman style set, because these three things sort of combine into give you a more refined sound, a more natural sound, something that doesn't sound like every other Harman set. And these three things combined also allow you to hear air, which is something that you typically don't get on Harman sets. Harman sets have a huge emphasis right here that really prevents you from hearing this. They have a huge sub bass component that prevents you from hearing that. On most Harman sets that are especially the strict Harman ones, you aren't hearing a whole lot of air. You can certainly point to the graph and say that there is air there, but in your ear, typically you are not hearing that. But on this one, kind of right away, again, people who are getting this set, first impression, why it sounds all different, you almost have an end-to-end different style of tuning and sound than you would get on what you're used to on a Harman style set, all the way from a different style sub bass all the way to hearing treble extension, which is what you're not used to hearing. So that is my case. I will say no, it doesn't actually sound like a Harman set, even though it graphs very similar to one. And as I said, if you have watched many of my after shows, you will recognize pretty much all of these as de-harmonizing moves, and I've done all of them. I lost count of how many Harman sets I've decreased the sub bass, increased the mid bass, decreased the upper mids, and I typically leave this alone unless it can't be heard or it's too much. But you typically have a setup that looks like this. You have a lot of sub bass and they boost the air because you can't hear this over this, so they tend to boost this. But when you drop this down, this becomes a lot more audible. You don't really need to boost it as much, so you could actually knock it down 1 or 2 dB. So yeah, very much those of you who watch those, these are all very familiar moves from making sets sound more natural, more top of the line, more refined, exactly what Alba did. So is this sub bass lacking? As I said, it's kind of rolled off a little bit. It's not like that. And if your theme song is AC/DC's Thunderstruck, then yes. If you are very much a sub bass focused person, you love tons of sub bass, that's primarily what's in your library, then yes, it will not sound right. It's much closer to Oxygen. So go back and listen to what people said about Oxygen. Very much a mid bass or a mid bass and mids focused set. It had some sub bass, but it sounded kind of like this. It's kind of had a roll off to it, just to focus your attention and keep all the good stuff in the mids. That's exactly what Oxygen said. So, I would say that, yeah. So on the other hand, if you watched my after shows before, and I've talked about why you dip the sub bass, why you increase the mid bass, that gives you a cleaner, sharper, better impact, more detailed, more textured style bass, because you don't have all this bloat and boom at the outer edge. Then this one is pretty much, this is what I would call this move makes it possible to hear more throughout the range with controlled sub bass. And then yes, this is exactly what you are interested in hearing. This is your grail. This is exactly what I've talked about many, many times in action, how you decrease the sub bass, a little bit of mid bass, and you hear everything all across the frequencies in a better, more natural way without boosting anything. They did that very, very well, and I understood exactly what they did. When I listened to it, and I went back to the graph and said, I'm not sure what they actually did, but very much that's exactly what it sounds like. It's, a better set through less sub bass. So I have no problems with that. But yeah, if you are a hip hop guy, then yeah, it's not going to sound all that right for you. So is it the best single dynamic driver? I would say it's not even the best single dynamic driver. When I first listened to it, I'm like, yeah, the driver is okay. Like, I wouldn't say it blew me away with its kind of sharp definition or how it hits or anything like that. But when you listen to the tuning plus the dynamic driver, I think the whole makeup, the whole is better than the parts in this case. So they didn't need to do the best dynamic driver, but they gave you really great tuning, and the two pair well together. And they tended to bob and weave through all the problems of lots of other sets. So Simgot's the bright upper treble, they avoided that. Falcon Ultra, the treble on that one kind of annoyed me, and I could never listen to that set for that reason. Alina and Oxygen, the upper mid, so this focus on this Harman upper mid style that is very much leaning into female vocals and that really high energetic female vocals. They brought it down so it actually works with more genres. So yeah, I think they listened to a bunch of other single dynamic driver sets and said, well, we're going to go refine it in this way so it's more general appealing. And that's exactly what they did. So yeah, I don't think it needed to be the best single dynamic driver ever, but at the price point, I think they did a really great tuning, and the two work together very, very well. So the sound, again, they took the general appeal of what makes Harman general appealing and improved the sound quality, the timbre, and removed the focus on the female vocals. Executed on a nice single dynamic driver, that was the cherry on top. And like I said, I can't sort of understate this little move right there, just bringing it just under the Harman, how that changes everything. Same thing with the mid bass. These two together, this very lean, very bright, typical Harman style sound. It affects everything, and it gives you Harman that typical sound. Every Harman set kind of sounds the same way. Just making these two small changes, almost changes everything, and that's why people are talking about it as a really perfect set, very nicely tuned set, because it no longer has that Harmonish to it. So, yeah, very nice. So sub bass, again, like I said, the sub bass on this guy is lower than it appears, and it has more of a mid bass snap to it. Very clean, very clean, and sounds great on genres that are not bass focused. I wouldn't even say it's the dynamic driver is the nicest, like I said, but it's the level control or the venting is very different. I'm not sure what they actually did, but I like it very, very much, for all the reasons that I went over before. If you're a fan of big booms and Thunderstruck, and you like to have that huge sub bass arena style, huge boom, it's not that style. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but as it is out of the box, it's not really that style. So the mids, again, more natural than you're expecting, as there is some mid bass. The upper mid is just below Harman. Fixes the two most common complaints on Harman sets, and space and separation, granted by the clean bass, the treble extension. This was the recipe for success. A lot of the things that I've talked about in the Aftershow executed, very, very well on Alba on a really nice dynamic driver. So I don't really have any complaints on the mids. It set itself up for very, very nice mids, and that's exactly what it sounds like. Is it a detailed beast? And again, I would say they didn't tune it in that way. They didn't really emphasize details. It's more, the dynamic driver is definitely more capable than it appears, but they didn't over push any little treble area to really stretch the details to make it super sharp. They didn't really do that. They gave you kind of an end-to-end general appealing, as opposed to a set that was really focused on being analytical or sharp or micro details. They didn't really do that. This is a end-to-end refinement versus a real sharpening of it. And treble, so again, this is one of those things that I think is catching reviewers differently as far as Harman. If you're very used to Harman style truncated treble, Harman tends to sound like this. It sounds like sub bass and upper mids. You very rarely hear upper treble and air on Harman sets, because there's such a crazy focus on the upper mids, and it draws all your attention, and it tends to mask everything that comes after it. This will sound very different. This will sound very extended and airy, very refined, very much closer to a top of the line set, just with that small change. And again, once you bring this down and it lets you hear that, it sounds totally different, exactly what it sounds like on Alba. Those that are stage aware, you'll hear it right away in the space projection. And I'll say, if you want to nitpick it, it does inherit some of the Harman dynamics. So this is probably 1 dB, kind of just under the line. They could have brought it down, another dB, and that would have gave you more of a dynamic range, have kind of an attack and a decay, and have a real back end to notes, and it would have been really top of the line style. But they left it kind of right there, general appealing, so I'm not going to nitpick it too much. And then dynamic driver, if you are used to some of the recent hybrid sets, balanced armatures have that speed, and on busier passages, you'll kind of notice that this isn't the most stellar, fastest dynamic driver. Like I said, it's nice, but some of the busier things, you definitely sort of hear where it not as cool as a balanced armature in that respect. Then stage, again, better than most Harman sets, as it has more space and more depth. Two small changes change the stage. This one definitely still has some of the Harman front projection, where everything is in front of your ears, but done better with more space, just because they brought those two areas back, and that will give you better stage. Sort of immediately noticeable if you are a Harman person who also is a stage person at the same time. So let's talk about some things that I would do in EQ. And I'll say the goal of this one was to really make it a one and done single dynamic driver. And I think Alba is very close. I think the tuning, like I said, these changes are the changes that I would have made. They probably didn't go as far as I did, but as far as giving you a set that is very close to a one and done, like the only single dynamic driver that you need to purchase, it's actually very, very close. So, but I will address some of the nitpicks. And here, so foo bars, graphic EQ, you can kind of see the values here. So again, I only move these in pretty small increments, 1s and 2s, and it's just sort of re-emphasizing some of the things that they've already done. So 50 to 77 hertz, that gets bumped up 1, and that's simply to address Thunderstruck. If you are a big sub-bass fan, you will want to add 1 dB. I added 1 dB just to make the sub-bass extension more audible. I don't like the boom, so I left it at 1. If you like more than 1, it will certainly do more than 1. But yeah, simply just to do Thunderstruck. A small bump just to make it audible, but not to boom. And pretty easy fix to do. You'll hear it kind of right away. 2 to 400, 1 to 2 dB, so this area right there in the mid bass. Again, just to make it slightly fuller mid so it sounds less Harman. You get more stage depth, it'll bring it behind the ears. You'll get a little bit more texture in the mids because now they are fuller. It doesn't, in this case, I would say it doesn't actually change the impact, the mid bass impact or slam all that much. Some single dynamic drivers, you notice that more. On this one, I didn't really notice it all that much. But mostly for bringing the stage to the back of the head as opposed to a SimGot set where that really makes kind of a difference on impact. On here, not as much. And then 2 to 7K, just kind of a straight across ear gain through treble, just to remove the remnants of the Harman sound so you can hear more texture to the mids and better balance. It also makes it easier to hear the upper treble without boosting it. And this will allow you to do volume scaling, as every single one and done dynamic driver should do well. And this one does that very well with a really small change. So that is what I got on Alba. Very nice set. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.